Russia's intention to attack Kharkov, Kharkiv, and then Odessa? The Russian army is taking advantage of the fact that Ukraine has not received enough weapons and additional troops to further stretch the enemy force, corporal Ukraine's weapons by attacking Kharkov. Kharkiv belongs to the province of the same name, only a few dozen kilometers from the Russian border, bordering the Belgorod region of Russia. That is a symbolic and ideal military goal, because the Russian army would not need to occupy too much land to put Ukraine's second largest city within artillery range. Also on May 12, on Telegram, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine Oleksandr Syrsky said the soldiers are facing a difficult situation in Kharkov, but they are doing everything to hold on defensive lines and positions, causing damage to the enemy. He affirmed that so far, Russia's attempts to break through Ukraine's defense lines have been blocked. It is impossible to independently verify the claims of Russia or Ukraine in this case. However, secondary sources can show part of what is actually happening. It all started at dawn on May 10, when Russia launched a coordinated attack with aircraft, artillery, infantry, and armored vehicles across the border in Kharkov province. By all accounts, and by the vibrations of giant bombs witnessed by New York Times witnesses, the fighting was fierce from the first minutes. Russia announced control of 2 more settlements. Residing in Kharkov, Kharkiv, in the northeast, and an area in Zaporizhzhia in the south of Ukraine. The above statement was issued by the Russian Ministry of Defense on May 15, according to Reuters. Russian forces in recent days have entered Kharkov, the city second largest in Ukraine. Western analysts see this as Russia's attempt to create a buffer zone to protect the Belgorod border area from shelling and territorial intrusions from Ukraine. Units of the battle group Russia's North captured the Hlyboke and Lukyantsi settlements in the Kharkiv region after intense fighting and penetrated deep into their opponents' defense lines, a statement from the Russian Defense Ministry said. Statement also talked about fierce fighting in other areas of Kharkiv and how Russian forces repelled 3 Ukrainian counterattacks. Ukrainian military officials emphasized that the Russians attacked the northern border area to distract Ukrainian forces in the south, but that effort was ineffective. However, that may not be entirely true, according to the New York Times. Recent reports indicate that Russian troops have moved close enough to a key highway to virtually cut off Ukraine's supply lines. Speaking to the New York Times, Mr. Mick Ryan, a retired Australian general and a member of the Lowy Research Institute based in Australia, commented that the coming weeks will be a difficult time for Ukrainian ground forces. The current attacks may seem small in scale, but the aim is to reduce the morale of Ukrainians, both civilian and military. If Ukrainians decide to hold on at all costs, they will add more troops and the force will become smaller and smaller, Mr. Ryan stated. However, according to the New York Times, Kiev needs to be careful in how it reacts because its army is exhausted in both men and ammunition. Weapons from the U.S. aid package have only just begun to be delivered to the front lines, putting the Ukrainian army in a passive position with few options at the moment. Could Russia attack the city of Odessa? China's Sohu channel said that recently there was information that Odessa, the largest port city in southern Ukraine, could become the next target in the Russian army's special military campaign. However, there are many challenges and dilemmas related to Russia's ability to gain control of Odessa, as well as the feasibility of this campaign. The reason the Russian military is said to be able to keep an eye onto Odessa because it has a strategic location. First, if Russia captures the city, it will cut off Ukraine's important military and economic lifeline, turning the country into a landlocked country. Second, controlling Odessa also means completely preventing the risk of Ukrainian suicide drone ships, USVs, attacking the Russian Navy's Black Sea Fleet. Odessa is the base for Kiev to produce USVs and launch attacks. Finally, after holding Odessa, the Russian army's next advances on other fronts may go more smoothly. According to information revealed by Ukrainian media, the Russian army's battle plan has been revealed. The next main direction of attack for the Russian army is not Kherson, but Odessa. The Russian army plans to gain complete control of Odessa in 3 months. According to revealed information, the Russian army has gathered the infantry division with up to 250,000 troops, prepared to launch a large-scale raid on this strategic port city. Accordingly, the Russian army's offensive against Odessa seems to be divided into 3 steps. First, the aerospace force stepped up large-scale bombing, completely destroying or weakening most military targets and commands of the Ukrainian army. The second step is that the Black Sea Fleet will provide fire support to attack Odessa from the sea direction. Finally, the combined forces of the Russian army will launch an all-out attack, taking out the remaining targets in Odessa. But according to Western media, if they attack Odessa, the army will still focus on field combat, the Air Force will coordinate bombing and fixed attacks on important targets, but the Russian Navy will hardly be able to fighting. Currently, both Russia and Ukraine are actively preparing. The suffocation before the war has enveloped this beautiful port city. What difficulties await the Russian army in Odessa? It can be affirmed that landing operations are extremely difficult for any army. U.S. Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks pointed out that amphibious operations are the most difficult of all military operations. Currently, the Russian army faces great challenges and risks if it wants to land in Odessa. Ms. Hicks' statement alluded to Russia's difficulties and uncertainties in carrying out the amphibious campaign. Odessa is an important port city and defense industry of current Ukraine and the former Soviet Union, with a population large numbers and a solid defense system. The Soviet Union once built giant underground fortifications here, to prepare for the possibility of a Third World War breaking out, turning Odessa into a fortress city. Firm. In addition, the Ukrainian army has deployed a large number of anti-ship missiles and air defense systems here, which puts great pressure on the Russian army in carrying out amphibious operations. Furthermore, this terrain conditions in the area surrounding Odessa also caused many difficulties for the Russian army. The area between Kherson and Odessa is largely low-lying and swampy, with inconvenient transportation, making campaign logistics very difficult. In addition, the terrain advantage controlled by the Ukrainian army also poses challenges for the Russian army in this direction. When the Russian army does not land by sea, it also has to cross the Dnieper River, which is really difficult. In addition, the current strength of the Russian Black Sea Fleet is also limited after many attacks by Ukrainian USVs causing heavy damage. The lack of landing craft and limited regional air defense capabilities expose the Russian military to many risks and challenges when carrying out landings. Under the supervision of real-time reconnaissance vehicles of the US and NATO operating in the Black Sea region and Romania, the Russian military's one move in the direction of Odessa will be tracked, making it difficult to promote. Gain effective fighting power. If the Russian army really launches a general attack, it will put great pressure on the Ukrainian army, and Ukraine's more than 1,000 kilometers front line will shake violently. The Ukrainian army lacks artillery shells, numbers, and anti-aircraft weapons. If the Russian army opens a new campaign in Kharkov and Odessa, Ukraine will simply not be able to send more troops to protect these two places. Under the pressure of attack, Kiev forces are likely to collapse on a large scale. Odessa is the largest port city in Ukraine. Agricultural products and domestically produced industrial products are mainly exported to the world through Odessa port. If the Russian army succeeds, Ukraine will be completely closed. Therefore, if Russia gets Kharkov and Odessa, Ukraine's fate will be threatened. At this time, no matter how determined Kiev is, it must return to the negotiating table. However, building a plan is simple, but organizing its implementation is difficult. Russia will face many challenges in capturing Odessa. Despite its strong military will and ambition, the feasibility of actual operations is limited by many factors. Landing in Odessa is a difficult task for Russia, not only needing to overcome terrain and military defense obstacles but also facing pressure and counterattacks from the international community. Given the current situation, it is not easy for the Russian army to capture Odessa, and the ability and success rate in that effort are facing huge challenges. Good essay.